Any more questions here at the front?
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Claire Spores from Oxfam. We very much welcome the World Bank's analysis that inequality is actually impeding growth along with other eminent bodies. In the St. Petersburg communique, there was discussion of the need for inclusive growth, but in communiques by the finance minister since then, that term has been dropped. So I'm just wondering how much the issue of inequality and the need for inclusive growth is actually being discussed, and will we see that back in the language being used? And also, how do you feel about developing countries being able to engage in the tax reform that's being led by the OECD and the G20, considering most low-income countries are not part of those groups? Thanks.
Right. So I'm not sure what the language is. The language that coming out of this G20 and the language that will come out eventually from the G20 leaders meeting, I'm not sure what it'll actually say. But I can tell you that just about every country that I visit is concerned about inequality. And it's new. You know, this is, I talk about Thomas Piketty's book all the time. I mean, you know, it was the best-selling book in the United States, and it was this dense 700-page tome that almost everyone bought and almost nobody read, actually read it. But I think it's an indication of just how much people are thinking about the problem of inequality. You know, the Occupy Wall Street movement. There's so many different movements that are addressing this question, and this is why we've put shared prosperity at the very top of our agenda. So I can assure you that we'll talk about it. And I have to say, Oxfam, the work that you've done, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the quotation that 85 people in the world control as much resources as the bottom half of the global population. Things like this are helpful. What our role, though, is that in everything we do, we have to put on the table approaches to building roads, building bridges, building healthcare systems, in how countries put their budgets together. We have to constantly be putting on the table options for making investments that will be more inclusive rather than less. And we know that there are really, really good examples that you never would expect that would have an impact on inequality. For example, Austria has built into their budgeting ways of improving gender equality. So, you know, what we're trying to do, we call it the science of delivery. What we're trying to do is capture those examples where countries have done really innovative things to move toward greater equality, and then putting this in front of governments. At the end of the day, the governments have to decide, but my sense is that we're not going backwards, and I'll tell you why. You know, when I went to one of the poorer areas of Uttar Pradesh in India, I saw poor women in these towns on their smartphones watching videos. Some of them were Korean soap operas, right? And the point is that people everywhere know how people everywhere else live, and it's going to be more and more like that. And so I think the demand for participation in the global economy is just going to get higher. And as that happens, we feel at the World Bank Group, we feel that it is our role to do everything we can to diffuse knowledge about things that are working and try to build in more fairness, more equity, more inclusion into global market capitalism. I mean, one of the interesting things about Piketty's book is that he writes in the book on page 20 that the two forces that have traditionally led the world toward convergence have been the diffusion of knowledge and investment in the productivity and skills of people. Well, that's what we want to be at the center of that, and to try to drive the world toward greater inclusion.